Hi everyone, Pitch Canker here, and today I want to discuss characters and how I make them scary. So to clarify, this video is for illustrating a visual piece, but in the future, I do want to share more about my approach to character design for comics, RPGs, etc. So my main hypothesis is that a truly scary character has their physical traits manifest from their horrific personality. A character is scary due to how they interact with others or how they're perceived by others. So, along those lines, scary is just kind of an adjective to describe a certain level of fear. They're trying to build out a character as we create this level of fear. So, when I'm starting a new character concept, the first thing I do is give the subject a personality. I think of how I want them to act. These traits or the way they act can be scary or not, but what's important is that we are humanizing the subject. We are making it relatable in some way. The essence of terror, in my experience, is a sense of uneasy familiarity. It's that kind of uncanny valley aspect. So, for my piece, the character is going to be a smiling man. I'm going to keep the concept very simple. In my mind, the character is always happy. Their favorite thing to do is to follow people around when they're not looking, and they love getting a good look at who they're following. Also, this thing likes to swallow people whole. Why not? It's a fear of mine personally. I think the idea of being swallowed whole is really scary. I think the idea of being stalked is very scary. So, these are two things I wanted to incorporate into this piece. So, let's talk about personal interaction with horror and with fear. To me, a large part of being an artist is sharing my interpretations of things, especially fear in my situation. Nothing is universal. Let's take a spider, for example, right? People are afraid of spiders, but why? Are you afraid of bugs? Are you afraid of being touched, right? Spiders have 8 legs. Maybe you don't like to be touched by many things at once. Maybe you're afraid of being stared at. Spiders have a huge amount of eyes. So, what you may think is scary, go beyond the surface level, right? Think about why you're scared of it. Think of why you're afraid of something with a big mouth. For me, I'm afraid of something with a big mouth because it means it can swallow me. Someone else who sees a big mouth might be afraid of teeth. They may have a fear of seeing a whole bunch of teeth or something like a shark. It's very different from person to person, but we have these same touchstones of fear, which I think is really important. So once I have this character kind of thought of, I sit down and I close my eyes and visualize the character in a very simple way. Whatever the first thing that comes to mind, I draw. It doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to take time, it just has to be fast enough that I can transcribe what I'm feeling about this character into a sketch. This design itself is going to end up changing so much over the course of the piece that I'm okay with it not being perfect. This is just the framework for my character and my thoughts. I'm not afraid to change. At this point, you have an idea and you're trying to figure it out on paper. So once it's sketched out, I just start observing and I have to start sculpting things out that will make the sketch scarier, keeping in mind the disposition of the character that I've created, because it loves to eat people whole. That big, open, wide, smiling mouth is important. Dripping fluids. Maybe it just ate somebody. The neck is long. Maybe it's long enough that it distends when it's eating somebody, like a snake, so it can fit it down its throat. I change the eyes so they're just like these little circles that are staring directly at you because I don't like to be stared at, and it loves staring at you. You know, I think environment also plays into this too. There's this black background that means you're in the dark. I'm almost assuming this creature is sneaking up on you in a dark place, and it's just so bright and vivid as opposed to that dark background contrast. I really like to think of the moment in which the character is being seen. An equally terrifying idea would have been, this thing consuming someone whole, with maybe their legs sticking out of its mouth and, its throat bulging. And what I wanted to go for was the minute you turn around and see this character, it plays on the personality of this thing following you and ultimately just being behind you, staring, its favorite activity. A bizarre, stalkerish creature, but it ultimately has a lot of personality. And I think that's what's important is that you're giving these creatures personality. I'm always trying to let that show through because that humanness, that kind of relatability, I think is what makes something actually scary. You draw a monster and it's completely unrelatable. It's not going to be scary. It's going to be just a concept, but you make it personal, and that is frightening. I see a lot of people who make like OCs or original characters, and they're trying to write a really fun, cool character. And I don't see that a lot for horror. People just draw scary things. A good concept of somebody who has a really good idea about this kind of stuff is Trevor Henderson. They're great artists. I'm sure you've heard of them. They've done like Siren Head, and they almost always give their monsters an environmental element, right? There is like a small backstory. There is like an idea that comes with them. There is like a personality. And I don't know if he follows this particular methodology, but he does on some level have this idea of like a character that he's drawing out, of something that has a background, that has a life story, that has certain things that it does. You know, we are creatures of habit, and we want to co-inhabit with others. But when we have something that is also a creature of habit that seems like a threat to us, that's when it becomes scary. And again, I'm gonna drive home this idea of familiarity, of the uncanny, of things that are familiar that are wrong. That is such an important thing when making something scary. And so you want to make this subject, you want to make your character as relatable as you can. And I think that really is the core of this entire idea. So to review, a character is scary due to how they interact with others or how they're perceived by others. So what we're doing is we are coming up with a background for this character that doesn't have to be frightening outright. It doesn't have to be gory or brutal. It can actually be completely tame. But what we want to do is take those elements of the character's personality and make them frightening to the viewer, whatever it might be. If they were a vampire, we want to show off those teeth, right? Or perhaps the fact that they can't be seen in a mirror. Maybe they dwell in the dark, or whatever. Everything can be scary. I think that's such an important thing to really harp on, is that fear is everywhere. Inspiration is everywhere. The way we do things on a daily basis are the main drivers for fear in your life, right? Like a car accident is scary because it's an irregularity in your normal day-to-day routine. So that's just the way I like to think about it. And I think it makes it way easier than being like, oh, what is a frightening thing that I can tack onto this piece? Like, oh, should I give this thing a bunch of arms? Will that even make it scary? I don't know where to begin. Begin with what you're familiar with. Dive into your own thoughts and say, what am I afraid of? This is a very hard exercise. It might be traumatic for some people, but in drawing horror artwork, I really do think that exploring your own fears, insecurities, things like that, you can, glean so much information about fear and what it looks like. And I think that's just so important. So to summarize everything, basically, come up with a character first. Come up with the core tenets of your character. What makes them a frightening character? And then from there, start sketching. Draw something. Draw what you think that looks like. And finally, use the actual personality, traits, background of your character to exacerbate and to really build out the terrifying themes of the painting. You're going to see a lot of results this way. I've seen a lot of results this way. There are obviously ways you can tweak and kind of like turn this process into your own, but this is how I do it. So I hope this helps you to make scarier characters. Finally, I wanted to touch on my absence from the platform the past few months. A few of you have noticed and commented that you're just wondering where I'm at. Unfortunately, you may have already read this on Instagram or Twitter, but I was diagnosed a few years ago with a disease called avascular necrosis. It is a bone disease and it is not curable. I will eventually need total hip replacements because I suffer from debilitating arthritis. It's really painful, and I'm just kind of getting through it right now. But as I always tell you guys, never give up. Keep pushing forward. That's what I'm doing right now. And so I will ask, if you want to support me in any way, please consider checking out my Patreon. If you do support me there, I will put you in the end of these videos in the credits. That funds a lot of my projects in my life. So if you feel so inclined, please check it out. I also have a brush set for sale, which is all the brushes I use. In this video in particular, I used, I believe, almost all my own brushes. Maybe I use a studio pen from Procreate as well, but I use mostly those brushes. And then finally, I also do commissions. So please feel free to contact me. I'll put all the info in the bio below. So everyone, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching. To my Patreon supporters, you guys are the best. You make this possible. And, drawing scary things doesn't have to be scary. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. You got this. Stay inspired. Draw daily. And most importantly, never give up.